My son was standing in the middle of my living room, shoulders squared, jaw tight, holding a stack of forms he had no right to touch. He placed them on the coffee table as if he were delivering a court order, not a crime. When I leaned forward and saw my own signature, crooked, shaky, nothing like the one I've written thousands of times in my 68 years, my chest tightened. Not from anger. From something colder. He'd forged it. The retirement account I spent 4 decades building, the one thing keeping me from becoming a burden to anyone, suddenly had an unauthorized transfer request attached to it, signed by a hand that wasn't mine. My own son stood 2 feet away from me, arms crossed, as if daring me to challenge him. When I looked up at him, he didn't flinch. "Dad," he said, voice smooth but fragile at the edges, "I'm doing this for us. For the family. Us. Family." Words that felt different coming from someone who had just tried to empty everything I had left. "You won't need all that money much longer," he added. "I'm planning for the future. You should be grateful." Grateful. He said it casually, like a man commenting on the weather, not a son explaining why he forged the name of the man who fed him, raised him, and paid for every chance he ever had. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I didn't even stand up. I simply stared at him, quiet, steady, until his confidence began to tremble. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not broken, just realigned. I realized love can rot when entitlement eats at the edges. I realized a child can grow into someone you no longer recognize. I realized silence sometimes reveals more truth than rage ever could. And I knew then, this was not a mistake. It was a choice. Before I continue, if stories like this interest you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now, let me tell you exactly how everything unfolded. When people talk about retirement, they imagine sunsets, quiet mornings, and peace earned honestly. For most of my life, that's all I wanted, a soft landing after decades of grinding through engineering jobs, double shifts, and years where my hands were more callous than skin. By the time I turned 68, I finally had it. A small house that smelled of cedar and coffee. A porch that faced the rising sun. A savings account I guarded with the same care a man guards his heartbeat. I didn't grow up with wealth. Everything I had came from building slowly, brick by brick, hour by hour. While my friends went on vacations, I repaired roofs. While others invested in luxuries, I invested in survival. My retirement wasn't a gift, it was a ledger of sacrifice. My son, Daniel, knew that. Or at least he used to. He wasn't always the man who stood in my living room waving forged paperwork. There was a time when he'd run barefoot along the hallway, laughing, dragging toy cars across the floor while I chased him with mock growls. He was bright, quick-minded, and endlessly curious. I remember sitting with him at the kitchen table helping him with math homework, watching his frustration melt the moment he understood something. That spark, God, that spark, made every hardship worth it. But somewhere between adolescence and adulthood, the spark twisted. What used to be ambition hardened into entitlement. Whenever life punched him, he expected my savings to cushion the blow. A failed business? Dad, I need help. A bad investment? Dad, you know I'll pay you back. And every time, I handed him something, never enough to cripple me, but always enough for him to believe the safety net was permanent. The last good memory I have of us is from 3 years ago. We were fixing the gutters on his house, well, I was fixing them while he scrolled through his phone. When I finished, he looked up just long enough to say, "You're a lifesaver, Dad." Back then, I didn't realize it wasn't gratitude. It was expectation. After my wife passed 12 years ago, the bond between us shifted. He became the person I tried to hold on to, the last living thread connecting me to a life that once had balance. Maybe that's why I overlooked the warning signs, the small lies, the subtle demands, the way he spoke about my savings as if they were already in his possession. I wanted to believe he cared. I wanted to believe blood mattered. In the quiet of my house, with nothing but the hum of the old refrigerator and the creak of settling wood, I often opened the metal safe where I kept my retirement documents. Not out of paranoia, out of habit. A lifetime of protecting what little I had taught me one thing: no one should touch what you've bled for unless they understand its cost. Daniel didn't. And the day he brought those forged papers, I realized he never had. That savings wasn't just money. It was everything I refused to lose. And he had just declared war on it. Looking back, the first real crack didn't appear the day Daniel forged my signature. It showed up months earlier, quiet, disguised, almost easy to dismiss. But betrayal rarely arrives with sirens. It seeps in through the smallest compromises. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were the days I drove into town to buy groceries and stopped by the hardware store for things I didn't always need but liked to examine anyway. When I came home, Daniel's car was already in my driveway. He was sitting on the porch, tapping his foot, pacing in small circles like someone rehearsing a speech. "Dad, I need to talk to you. It's important." His tone wasn't anxious. It was entitled, the kind of urgency born from someone who believes the answer should already be yes. He launched into a pitch about a new business venture. A can't-lose opportunity in tech distribution. He needed capital to secure early access. He said the phrases rapidly, confidently, like a salesman closing a deal he assumed was already settled. Then he gave me the number. $40,000. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the number was so disconnected from reality. I told him gently, "Son, I can't do that. That's my retirement. I need it to live." Instantly his expression shifted, the way a clear sky shifts when a storm moves in. "Come on, Dad. You're sitting on money you barely use. You've always helped me. Why stop now?" I reminded him that help and sacrifice weren't the same thing. What he was asking for would cripple me. He didn't want support, he wanted control. He sighed dramatically and leaned against my wall. "You know, sometimes I feel like you don't believe in me." It wasn't sadness in his voice. It was manipulation wearing sadness as camouflage. I told him no again, firmer this time. And that's when I saw it, the flash of resentment in his eyes. Sharp. Quick. Gone in a second, but real enough to make my stomach tighten. He left without another word, slamming the door harder than necessary. For the rest of the evening, the house seemed louder in its silence. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the dusk settle over the yard, wondering when my son had started measuring my love by the weight of my bank account. I didn't know then that this moment was only the opening note of a much darker song. But a father feels the shift when something is slipping away: respect, gratitude, decency. That day, Daniel didn't just walk off my porch. He took the first step toward trying to take everything I had. 3 months after that argument on my porch, the real blow landed, clean, deliberate, and cold enough to numb me. It was a Friday morning, the kind where the light comes in soft and the house feels steady. I had just finished my coffee when I heard keys at the front door. Not a knock. Keys. Daniel walked in like he owned the place. He didn't greet me. Didn't ask if he could come in. He simply marched to the coffee table and placed a stack of documents on it. Thick papers, clipped neatly, smelling like the ink was barely dry. Something in me tightened. I had seen that kind of paperwork before: transfer requests, bank authorizations, account modifications. But those were mine. These were not. "Dad," he said, exhaling as though he carried the heavier burden, "I took care of something for you." I picked up the top sheet. My name stared back at me in bold print. Below it, a signature, my signature, tilted at a strange angle, the tail of the G too long, the curve of the L too shallow. A forgery, obvious to anyone who had ever watched my hand shake slightly from age. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't blink. "A financial transfer. You weren't using your retirement properly. I reorganized some things for the family's future. It'll be better for all of us. Better for us." He said it like we were partners in a business he hadn't even told me existed. I flipped through the pages. A transfer of my retirement account into a joint investment fund, under his control. A request to grant him power of attorney for expedited access. A note stating I was in declining cognitive condition. He hadn't just forged my name. He'd forged my mind. He walked behind me and placed a hand on my shoulder as though he were comforting me. "You should be relieved," he murmured. "I'm protecting the family. You won't need all that money much longer. Let me handle things before it's too late." I removed his hand slowly. "Too late for what?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to reveal the truth. "For you, Dad. I mean, you're almost 70. You should be thinking about the end." The end. My own son telling me I was nearing the finish line, and he was already collecting the prize money. I rose from the chair. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steadily, the way a man rises when something inside him clicks into place. I held the forged signature up to the light. "This isn't mine," I said. He scoffed. "Don't start. You probably forgot you signed it. You forget a lot these days." A neat little loophole he was trying to create, paint me as confused, disoriented. It hit me then that he had rehearsed this. Maybe for weeks. Maybe longer. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Just sign the rest of the forms officially and we're done. No drama. No problems." I looked at him, not the boy I raised, not the young man who used to ask me how the world worked, but a stranger wearing my son's face. "No," I said. A single word, steady as a steel beam. His jaw tightened. His eyes sharpened. "If you don't cooperate, I'll make this very difficult. I'm not letting you waste money that should go to the family." Family. Interesting how people use that word right when they want to take something. He gathered the papers, shoved them back toward me, and hissed, "Think about it." Then he stormed out, slamming the door so violently a picture frame rattled on the wall. I sat alone in the quiet, staring at the forged signature lying crooked on the table. For a long time, I didn't move. Not because I was afraid, but because something inside me was settling into a new shape. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a mistake. This was a man who had decided that my life's work belonged to him. And that meant I had to decide something too. I wasn't going to let him take what I spent 40 years building. Not illegally. Not through lies. Not through blood. A line had been crossed, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. When the door slammed behind him, the house didn't just go silent, it felt hollow, the way a room sounds after someone has stolen something from it. I stood in the center of my living room, staring at the papers he left scattered like debris after a storm. My forged name lay there in black ink, a small signature carrying a lifetime's weight. I needed air. I stepped outside, letting the cold morning breeze wash over me. The oak tree beside the porch rustled softly, its branches moving like they were whispering old truths I had ignored for too long. For years, I believed Daniel's frustrations were just missteps, temporary storms he would outgrow. I excused the attitude, the demands, the subtle disrespect, telling myself grief over his mother, pressure from life, stress, anything but greed. But that forged signature, it stripped every excuse away. I walked down to the small pond behind my house, the place where I always went when my mind needed untangling. Ducks glided across the surface, calm and unbothered. Nature has no interest in lies, it only reflects what you bring to it. As I sat on the weathered bench, I felt an ache settle in my chest. Not anger. Not rage. Loss. The loss of a son I thought I still had. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old leather-bound notebook I'd carried for years. It held everything important to me: financial notes, reminders, the occasional memory written down so I would never forget the good parts of life. I opened to a blank page and wrote the date. Then, with slow, steady strokes, I wrote: Daniel attempted unauthorized transfer. Forged signature. Full intention to seize retirement funds. Seeing the words on paper grounded me. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't overreacting. This was real. And I had to protect myself because my own son had proven he would not. When I returned to the house, I didn't pick up the scattered documents. I left them exactly where they fell. Instead, I went to the safe in my bedroom, the one place in the world untouched by anyone but me. Inside were the originals, my retirement paperwork, tax forms, bank statements. I checked each one the way a builder checks a foundation for cracks. Everything was intact. Everything was still mine. For now. As I stood there with the safe door open, the truth settled completely: my silence had become his opportunity. And if I stayed silent any longer, I'd lose everything I spent a lifetime earning. So I made a quiet vow in that moment: no yelling, no arguing, no useless confrontation. Just preparation. Because revenge doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it begins with a man sitting alone, breathing steadily, preparing to defend what's his. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, not from rest, but from clarity. Once someone shows you who they are, sleep stops offering comfort. I sat at the kitchen table, the forged documents still untouched where he left them, like evidence waiting for a judge. And in a way, I was becoming a judge, quietly reviewing the case of a son against his own father. I opened my safe again, one sheet at a time, and began comparing dates, amounts, and records. I wanted to understand the full scope of what Daniel had tried to do. But what I found was worse than anything I expected. There were inquiries on my accounts, requests for information I hadn't made. Notes from the bank about recent activity I didn't recognize. Emails requesting verification for changes I never approved. All of them neatly time-stamped in the weeks leading up to his little performance in my living room. He hadn't acted on impulse. He had been preparing. I sat back, letting the truth settle like dust on an abandoned shelf. The betrayal wasn't sudden, it was systematic. He'd studied me, studied my finances, and timed everything for maximum control. That realization hurt in a way anger never could. I called my bank manager, an old friend named Harris who had watched me deposit checks for decades. When I explained the situation, his voice tightened. "Peter, we flagged some suspicious behavior, but the requests were worded as if you were delegating authority to your son. We were waiting for confirmation from you." Suspicious. Yes. That was the right word. It fit Daniel perfectly now. Harris emailed me a file containing every access attempt, every inquiry, every login from devices that weren't mine. When I printed them and laid them on the table, the pattern was undeniable. Daniel had been probing for weaknesses, testing how close he could get before I noticed. But that wasn't all. When I searched my email for related messages, I found something else: copies of loan applications, his, with my name listed as a supporting guarantor. He had attempted to extend credit using my identity. The applications hadn't been processed, thanks to incomplete documentation, but the intent was clear. My son wasn't drowning and reaching for a lifeline. He was digging holes and expecting me to pay for the shovels. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. Messages he sent to relatives claiming I was losing mental sharpness, planting seeds to justify taking control of my finances. Subtle lies, disguised as concern. This wasn't just greed, it was a campaign. By mid-afternoon, my dining table looked like the headquarters of an investigation. Papers lined up in perfect rows, each one a small betrayal, each one a chisel chipping at the man I once thought my son was. I needed professional confirmation. So I called Emily Carter, a financial advisor I had seen 5 years ago. When I told her everything, she didn't sound surprised, just disappointed. "Peter, what he attempted is illegal. Attempted financial control, fraudulent authorization, potential identity misuse. You need protection. Immediately." Her calm tone made the truth feel even heavier. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad decision made in panic. Daniel had targeted me the way a thief targets a safe, patiently, methodically, imagining the reward before considering the cost. When I hung up, I looked at the spread of evidence one last time and felt something inside me change. Not rage. Not grief. Something stronger. Resolve. If he wanted a war over the life I built, he was about to learn something his ambition never taught him. A man who spent 40 years building stability does not lose it to someone who never learned how to stand on his own. By the time the sun slipped behind the trees that evening, my kitchen table looked like a battlefield, papers sprawled across it like fallen soldiers, each one carrying the truth of what Daniel had been planning. I stood there for a long time, palms flat on the wood, staring at the evidence of a son who had traded love for opportunity. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hoping for a misunderstanding. Every piece pointed to the same conclusion: he intended to take everything. A strange calm settled over me, not numbness, not shock, but clarity. The kind that arrives when a man finally stops denying what's right in front of him. I reached for my notebook, the same old leather-bound one I'd written in that morning, and opened to a fresh page. I wrote. "Today is the last day I let Daniel endanger my future." My handwriting shook, but the meaning stood firm. I wasn't declaring war. I was declaring boundaries, real, final ones. Boundaries I should have set years ago. Kindness without limits becomes an invitation for exploitation, and I had given him an open door for far too long. I gathered the documents into a folder, organized them by date and category: unauthorized access attempts, fraudulent applications, fabricated statements about my mental state. Each page felt heavier than paper. Each one was proof that silence had cost me more than confrontation ever would. I called Emily, my advisor, one more time. "I'm ready," I told her. She didn't ask ready for what, she already knew. "Good," she said. "Then let's secure everything before he makes another move." After we hung up, I locked the folder inside my safe and closed the steel door with a firm click. It echoed through the room like a gavel striking. That sound marked the end of something: my tolerance, my excuses, my hope that Daniel would correct himself without consequence. I stood there in the quiet, watching my own reflection in the safe's polished surface. The man looking back wasn't weak. He wasn't confused. He wasn't a father being taken advantage of. He was a man who had finally made a decision. I would protect what I built. I would protect my future. And Daniel. Daniel would learn the cost of trying to steal it. I didn't have to wait long for Daniel to return. Men like him don't handle losing control gracefully. The next afternoon, while I was tightening a loose hinge on the back door, I heard tires grind up my driveway, fast, irritated, careless. A moment later, my front door flew open without a knock. "Dad! We need to talk. Now." He stormed into the kitchen, eyes sharp, chest rising and falling like he'd run a mile fueled by anger alone. He didn't even look at me, his gaze went straight to the safe in the corner, as if expecting it to magically surrender everything inside. "I called the bank," he snapped. "They said the transfer was blocked. You reversed everything. Why would you do that?" There it was. No apology. No remorse. No acknowledgement that he had crossed a line so bright it could blind a man. Just shock that his plan hadn't worked. I wiped my hands on a rag, set it aside, and faced him. Because you had no right to any of it. His expression twisted in disbelief, almost offended. No right? I'm your son. Who else would you leave it to? You don't need that much money anymore. You act like you're immortal. I stepped closer. Wanting to live with dignity isn't immortality, Daniel. His jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. I was trying to help, trying to make sure everything was organized before you. He stopped, but the word hung there anyway. Before you die. The disrespect didn't even hurt anymore, it simply clarified things. You forged my signature, I said calmly. You tried to access my accounts behind my back. You attempted to take loans using my name. That's not helping. That's stealing. He waved his hands dismissively, like the truth was an inconvenience. Dad, stop exaggerating. If I really wanted to steal, I wouldn't have told you anything. You're acting ungrateful. Ungrateful. It was almost laughable. Ungrateful for what? I asked. For being targeted by my own son? His face reddened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm offering to manage everything so you don't have to worry. But if you lock me out, you leave me no choice. I'll go to court and get authority anyway. The family will back me. Everyone knows you're getting older. There it was, the threat he'd been building toward. He wasn't asking for permission. He was announcing a takeover. I looked him in the eye, not blinking. You're welcome to try. That answer stunned him. He expected fear. Compliance. Maybe even pleading. He didn't expect steel. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you don't cooperate, you'll regret it. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as my son, but as a man who believed he could bully his own father into submission. And something inside me hardened. Daniel, I said quietly, the only thing I regret is not seeing who you'd become sooner. His face tightened, a mixture of fury and wounded pride. He pointed toward the safe. That money will end up mine one way or another. You can either make this easy or make it ugly. I turned away and picked up the hinge I'd been repairing. Then it will be ugly. Because you're not getting a penny. He froze, stunned by the dismissal. Then he slammed his fist against the table. You'll be sorry. No, I said without looking at him. But you will be. He stood there a moment longer, breathing hard, before storming out the door, tires screeching as he sped down the driveway. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence before a battle begins, the moment a soldier checks his shield and sword before stepping into the field. Except my weapons weren't steel. They were preparation, and the truth. Daniel had declared war. He just didn't know I was ready for it. The morning after Daniel's outburst, the air felt different, heavy, charged, as if the house itself understood that the next steps I took would decide everything. I brewed a pot of coffee, but the smell did nothing to soothe me. I wasn't shaken anymore. I wasn't wondering where I went wrong. I was preparing. At exactly 9 a.m., I drove to Emily Carter's office. She greeted me at the door, eyes full of the quiet seriousness of someone who has seen too many families torn apart by greed. She didn't waste time. Peter, she said as we sat down, based on what you've shown me, your son's actions qualify as attempted financial fraud. You need to secure what's yours before he escalates. Escalates. The word felt small compared to what Daniel had already done. I handed her the folder, the forged signature, the unauthorized inquiries, the fraudulent loan attempts, the emails where he implied I was losing mental clarity. She examined each page with focused precision. Finally, she looked up. You have more than enough evidence to protect yourself legally. The question is, what do you want to do with your retirement account now? It was a fair question. For the first time in my life, I had to consider whether leaving anything to Daniel was a reward for behavior that nearly destroyed me. I thought of his words, "You won't need that money much longer." As if my life was a countdown he could calculate for personal gain. "No," I said finally. "He's not getting a cent. I want to move everything into a place he can't touch. Permanently." Emily nodded. "We can do that. You can establish a trust with a chosen beneficiary, someone you trust completely. Your son won't have access, and he won't have grounds to challenge it. A beneficiary. Someone deserving. Someone who wouldn't see my life's work as a prize." My thoughts went immediately to my granddaughter, Lily, my daughter's child. A gentle, thoughtful girl who visited often, who brought me drawings and laughed at my old stories. She once told me she wanted to be an architect because Grandpa builds things that stay. She never asked for anything. She just cared. "Yes," I said. "I want everything to go to her." Emily smiled softly, as if relieved I had someone in my life who wasn't poisoned by entitlement. "Then we'll structure the trust in her name. Daniel can't access it, borrow against it, or interfere." We spent hours completing the paperwork. Page after page, signature after signature, my signature, real, deliberate, clear. As I signed, something in me felt lighter. I wasn't acting out of revenge. I wasn't punishing Daniel. I was reclaiming what he tried to steal and redirecting it towards someone who would use it with gratitude, not greed. Emily slid the final document across the desk. "Once this is processed, your retirement savings will be legally protected. Daniel can scream, threaten, or file whatever he wants, he won't be able to touch a dime." A warmth spread through my chest, a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that justice could still be built like a structure, strong, intentional, unshakable. Sadness that it had come to this, that a father had to defend himself from his own child. Before leaving, Emily added one more thing. "Peter, once Daniel realizes the money is gone, expect backlash. People who believe they're entitled don't accept consequences quietly." Her warning hung in the room like a low-hanging storm cloud. I already knew it was true. Daniel wasn't going to walk away. He'd come back swinging. But now, I was ready. On my drive home, I stopped by the post office and mailed a sealed letter addressed to my granddaughter, to be opened when she turned 18. Inside was a simple message. "This is yours now. Not because I needed to punish anyone, but because you reminded me that some people love without expecting to inherit what they never earned." When I placed the letter into the outgoing box, I felt something shift inside me, a door closing, a foundation solidifying. Daniel had spent months preparing to steal my future. He didn't know I had just written him out of it completely. The war he started had officially changed sides. And I was no longer the man he thought he could control. It took less than 48 hours for Daniel to realize the world he thought he controlled had shifted under his feet. I was in the yard trimming the hedges when my phone began buzzing non-stop, 5 calls in a row. All from him. I let everyone go to voicemail. A man who tries to steal from you forfeits the right to urgency. By the 6th call, he switched tactics and drove straight to my house. The engine roared up the driveway, sputtering like it was as furious as its driver. Daniel jumped out before the car fully stopped, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. He marched toward me with the look of a man who'd built his entire future on someone else's foundation and just watched it collapse. "What did you do?" he shouted. "Don't play games, what did you do to the accounts?" I set down the hedge trimmer. "I protected them." His eyes widened with disbelief, then fury. "Protected them? You let some lawyer trick you. You moved everything into a trust? For Lily? Are you insane?" The fact that he said my granddaughter's name like it was an insult told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. You plan to steal my retirement, I said calmly. I redirected it to someone who won't abuse it. That money was supposed to help me, he snapped. I'm your son. I'm the one who actually needs it. What does a kid need with that kind of money? You just threw away my future. His future. Not mine. Not ours. His. Your future, I said, was never mine to fund. He paced in sharp circles, gripping his hair, muttering under his breath. I'd seen that posture before, years ago, when one of his business ventures crumbled and he insisted the world was against him. But this time, he wasn't blaming bad luck. He was blaming me. This isn't fair, he growled. You blindsided me. You handed everything to a child behind my back while sabotaging me. You made me look like a fool at the bank. Ah. There it was. Not regret. Not apology. Humiliation. He lunged toward the steps, pointing a trembling finger at me. Undo it. Call that advisor and undo it. If you don't fix this, I'll take legal action. I'll tell everyone you're losing your mind. I'll make sure people know you're not capable of managing your own finances. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move an inch. You tried that already, Daniel. It didn't work. His mouth fell open. He hadn't expected me to know about the emails he'd sent, the lies he'd crafted. He staggered back a step, swallowing hard. He couldn't finish. Rage tangled his words. Then something cracked, inside him, not me. His shoulders slumped, his eyes darting as if searching for someone else to blame. His breathing hitched. For one brief moment, I saw fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing access to what he thought he owned. Dad, he said suddenly, voice softening into desperation, listen, we can work something out. Just give me a portion. A little. Enough to get things back on track. You don't understand how much pressure I'm under. Pressure. Always pressure. Never responsibility. No, I said. Not anymore. His face hardened instantly, like a door slammed shut behind his eyes. Then don't expect me to be around when you need me. He turned, marched to his car, and sped away without looking back. I watched the dust rise behind him, realizing the truth. I hadn't lost my son that day. I had simply stopped carrying the weight of a man who abandoned himself long ago. For 2 days, the house stayed quiet. Not peaceful, just waiting. I knew Daniel wouldn't accept what happened. Entitlement doesn't surrender, it retaliates. And on the third evening, just as the sun was bending toward the horizon, a knock finally came. Not loud. Not frantic. Calculated. I opened the door to find Daniel standing on the porch, wearing a forced expression of calm control. His eyes, however, betrayed him. Sharp, unsettled, vibrating with the frustration of a man who didn't like being beaten at his own game. I'm here to talk, he said, voice low. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, scanning the room as if expecting to see the safe pulled open, money spilling out, proof that he could still win somehow. We need to settle this, he began. Before things get worse. Worse. He still believed he had leverage. He sat across from me at the table, folding his hands as if rehearsing diplomacy. Look, maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe things got messy. But you overreacted. Moving your entire savings? Putting it in a trust for Lily? That was extreme, Dad. She didn't try to steal it, I replied. His jaw tightened. I didn't try to steal anything. I tried to secure our future. You misinterpreted. I leaned forward. You forged my signature. You contacted the bank pretending to be me. You attempted to use my name as collateral for your own debts. That isn't securing my future. That's erasing it. The room went still. Daniel exhaled through his nose, eyes narrowing. Then the mask slipped. You know what? He said quietly. Fine. If you won't help me willingly, then I'll go through legal channels. A judge will see you're not fit to manage your finances alone. You're making irrational choices. You're vulnerable. I will get access. The threat was no longer subtle. He laid it bare between us like a blade. I stood. Slowly. Calmly. Go to court, Daniel. Tell them everything. Bring every lie you've built. Because I've already documented every attempt you've made. Every email. Every forged form. Every inquiry. The trust is locked. Ironclad. Your threats mean nothing now. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. Real fear. The kind born from losing the last illusion of control. You're choosing her over me, he whispered. No, I said. I'm choosing what's right over what's convenient. His expression hardened into something cold. Then this is it. Don't expect me back. I nodded. That's your decision. He walked to the door, hesitated for just a second, as if waiting for me to beg him to stay. I didn't. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him like the final line of a story that had been miswritten for years. As the quiet settled in, I realized something deeply painful but true. I hadn't pushed him away. He had walked away the moment he decided my worth was measured by what he could take. After Daniel walked out of my home for the last time, the world didn't suddenly feel lighter. Relief doesn't always come with celebration. Sometimes it arrives the way dawn does, quiet, unnoticed, revealing its presence only when you realize the darkness has softened. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee, listening to the ordinary sounds of life around me, birds arguing in the oak tree, wind brushing against the gutters, a neighbor's distant lawnmower humming like an old memory. Everything looked the same, yet something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was no longer living in fear of what my son might do tomorrow. I had secured my future. The storm had passed. Still, peace has a way of feeling foreign after a long fight. I spent the afternoon cleaning the house, running a cloth across the kitchen table where Daniel had once stood threatening legal action, dusting the bookshelf he used to pull from when he pretended to care about sharing my interests. Every corner carried ghosts of what could have been. But ghosts don't frighten me. The living do. By evening, I opened the safe once more. Not out of paranoia, out of closure. The folder of documents sat there neatly arranged, evidence of his attempts, the trust paperwork, the notarized signatures securing everything in Lily's name. I traced a finger across the edge of the file and felt, for the first time in months, a sense of finality. I didn't protect my savings out of spite. I protected them because a man should not labor his whole life only to hand his work to someone who treats it as an entitlement. I chose Lily because she carries no greed in her heart. Because she listens. Because she hugs me without looking at the pockets of my coat as if expecting something to fall out. Later that night, a letter arrived in my mailbox. My daughter's handwriting. Inside was a folded sheet decorated with uneven little hearts, drawn by Lily. Grandpa, Mommy said you made something special for me. She said it's for when I'm older. I don't know what it is, but I love you. I hope I make you proud. I read it twice, then pressed it against my chest. That small note weighed more than all the money I'd ever earned. It reminded me why I fought, not against my son, but for myself. For dignity. For the right to decide where my life's work would go. I walked to the porch, letter still in hand, and watched the sky fade from orange to violet. The world felt honest again, stripped of manipulation and fear. I wasn't celebrating winning anything. I had simply restored what should never have been threatened. Before going inside, I whispered into the evening air, not to Daniel, not to anyone in particular, but to the life I had reclaimed. No one gets to take what I built. Not even blood. And for the first time in a very long while, I slept without waking in the middle of the night wondering what he was planning next. The foundation of my life was steady again. Strong. Untouchable. In the weeks that followed, I thought a lot about what had happened, not just the forged signature, the threats, or the attempts to take what I earned, but the deeper fracture beneath it all. People assume betrayal arrives with violence or shouting. But the truth is quieter. It comes through entitlement whispered as love, pressure disguised as responsibility, and manipulation wrapped in the language of family. What Daniel did wasn't just an attack on my finances. It was an attack on my dignity. And when a man reaches my age, dignity is often the last treasure he has left to protect. I didn't redirect my retirement savings to punish him. Revenge was never my goal. What I wanted, what I deserved, was peace. And peace cannot exist where someone believes your life is theirs to control. If there is one thing I learned, it is this. Kindness without boundaries becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. You can love someone with all your heart and still refuse to let them destroy you. Blood may tie us together, but character determines whether we stay connected. And I also learned something just as important. You are allowed to protect what you built. Your work, your savings, your sanity, your final years, these are not debts your children are entitled to collect. They are parts of your life you earned through sacrifice. No one has the right to claim them simply because they share your name. When I look at Lily's letter, I'm reminded that goodness still exists in the world. That not every generation loses its way. That the future can still be handed to someone who will honor it instead of consume it. So if you've listened this far, remember this. Honor yourself. Defend your boundaries. And never apologize for choosing peace over exploitation. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. It means more than you know. Stories like mine aren't just about money or family conflict, they're reminders of why boundaries matter, why dignity matters, and why every person has the right to protect what they've spent a lifetime building. If you appreciate honest, emotional stories like this one, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these lessons reach others who may be facing their own quiet battles. Take care of yourself. Protect your peace. And remember, your life's work belongs to you.